Today, I'm excited that you're going to listen to a former CDO and a current CDO, Mark and Hoffenbauer, talk about the data mesh. We're going to talk about the data mesh from a perspective of a CDO. We're going to think about things you need to consider as you roll out your data mesh. We understand it's more than a technology. We understand there are other elements you have to consider. But for a CDO, there's two things that I think are really important: data management and data value. Those are key parts for any CDO's agenda, and that's exactly what we're going to focus on today. At the end, we're going to imagine a little bit about what we might do with a data mesh, what big problems we might solve. And so stay tuned for that as well. Welcome to the show, Marco.
Hi, Adrian.
Hey,
Nice to see you. How are you?
doing well, my friend. Good to see you. I love the background. Your sweater matches the living room as well, or the man room as well. So that's kind of nice to see. Hey, before I get started, Marco, I was thinking this morning, I was having my cup of coffee and I haven't been back to the Netherlands in a while. And so I'm way short of stroop waffles. But I was thinking about the stroop waffle and I was imagining that I had one. And, it kind of looks like a mesh, right? You've got these two waffles and they glue together with caramel and cinnamon. It's a delicious treat. The mesh is a delicious treat. But the stroop waffle was invented by the Dutch. You're Dutch, so you're an expert in the data mesh just by your connection to the stroop waffle. So let me give you that credit as well. Thank you for that delicious treat. You ready to get started, Marco?
Yes,
You
absolutely.
took you taking credit for the stroop waffle. Is that your favorite treat as well?
It is. It is. No, it's really delicious. And
You know
every
what I do
Saturday
with
we
it?
see all the
I,
tourists
I
eating it.
lay mine on my coffee. I get my hot coffee and then I lay it up there until it gets nice. Anyway, let's not talk about stroop waffles. Let's talk about data mesh. So I want to talk about three areas today. I just highlighted them in the summary, but let me introduce them to you. Right, we're going to talk about governance. We're going to talk about value, and then we're going to imagine a bit. And the imagine part I think is going to be interesting because I'm one of those guys that'll say, "Oh, we're going to go do this," and you're one of those studios that'll say, "Oh, hold on a second. What about this? What about that?" And so I'm really looking forward to that challenge session. Yeah, governance. Let's pick the hardest one first, Marco. Look, for any CDO, governance is difficult. There's a lot to do. It's not just the fact that there's so much to do across such a wide enterprise, but it's how you do it, right? The inconsistency, right? The focus, right? I've got to do a lot in different ways across a big environment. I would propose that on a data mesh where you're starting to focus on products, I propose in a data mesh where you have a consistent framework that it's going to be easier, that it could be easier. That as a CDO, I think we take a step back and we say, maybe we reset our approach. Maybe there's a different way to do this on a mesh. And before I jump you in, Marco, I just thought to myself, let me just make sure that everyone in the audience today understands what a mesh is. And so give me 2 minutes here. Principally, when we're talking about a mesh, right, with a CDO lens on, what we're talking about is bringing a lot of data sets from a number of different sources. I'm not talking about centralization. I'm talking about leave the data where it is, connect to it anywhere, bring it forward. Of course, if you bring a lot of data forward very quickly, which you can do in a mesh, you have to organize it in logical domains. And so you create these logical domains. These aren't architecture or IT domains. These are business or these are data consumer focused domains. You organize data in domains that are going to be able to be quickly consumed by the business teams. But then you go a step forward. In each domain, you create these data products. You focus on products that then can actually be actioned by teams. They're aggregated data sets. In principle, that's a mesh. And of course, you've got governance principles and self-service principles built across. So sounds incredible. And that's why I think, Marco, when we talk about data management, yeah, there's got to be a better way to do it on a mesh than we've been doing it all this time. What do you think, Marco? Am I making that up or do you agree?
No, I agree. So if you look at the traditional way of data management in the context of making data available to the organization, you typically replicate data, you load it in a data lake, and from there you expose it to the organization. The focus of data governance is then really on the entire lake. Yeah. While the difference is in a mesh, you focus really on the product, and that's really more than the product mindset. Yeah, what do my consumers need? What are their requirements? Yeah, um, and then you work backwards still on the concepts of data governance, which is about you have to make sure, of course, that data can be trusted. You need to take it from reliable sources and so on. But it's very focused on the actual usage of the data and not so much on the entire platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've got a product now. It's you can say, I'm going to focus quality, I'm going to focus accountability on a product. I'm going to make sure that I'm not duplicating products. That's got to be easier than trying to do it for tables and rows and columns and tables and bits and bytes, right? This is so much easier. And then you have the consistency. You don't have to reinvent that approach for every data source. The mesh is consistent across the board from the time the data enters the mesh until the point that it exits the mesh. You've got that consistency. What about the ecosystem? I've been excited recently about thinking about, and we've got some partners we work with, but think about the broader ecosystem. I'll say, can you imagine what a Calibra would look like on a mesh, or what something like an Informatica would look like, or an Emuta? And there's a number of great, tools out there that you could use, whatever you're already using. But can you imagine your current data management tools working in a mesh? That's, I think, an even greater opportunity for us to think about.
Well, just for example, a tool like Colibra, right? I mean, it gives you the opportunity to look for a data product rather than just a specific data set that resides in your data platform, yeah, like a data lake. So I think, this is just an example of how, yeah, how it actually is simplified. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's very focused on the actual products and not on all the data. It's really on the data that you need, like a customer data set or a location data set or an asset data set. I mean, it's very focused.
Yep. We're managing data quality and we're a CDO. There's a couple of different aspects you have to consider. One is when the data's bad, you got to go to an owner somewhere and
Uh,
say, "Hey, that data's bad," and that's man, that's hard, right? Because there's a lot of finger pointing. Well, hold on a second. I only manage it here. You got to go to the source owner that manages it over there, and the source owner says, "Hold on a second. I brought the data in raw. Somebody on the application side manipulated it and made it bad." And so there's a lot of finger pointing. There's not a lot of accountability when you talk about a data product. I think you have cleaner accountability for the data they're bringing in, the data they're choosing to bring in. But here's something that I think is really neat about a product. I've seen something that we've been talking about is the ability to let a product consumer, a business consumer, look at that product and judge it. Because you say, well, who told you that quality was good? Well, there's a data architect or there was a data owner and they said the data was good. The quality of the data is really and should be based on the people that are going to use it. So if you have a business consumer using a product and they look at something and say, man, this isn't good, it's junk, and they give it a thumbs down, right? And you're a product owner and you can see a lot of downvotes for your data product, you got to react, right? Again, it feels very natural, right? It's what we do already online, so to speak, right, in our social internets. But the ability to have and to empower a consumer to judge that quality on their end, and then to have somebody accountable to fix it in the back end, that's a really neat loop there. I think that we haven't been able to do in the past. So I'm excited about that, Marco.
no, yeah, no, on the data quality and basically the community voting on it, I think that's fantastic because it gives you a couple of control points, right? So one control point is the customer is always right. So if the customer say, hey, your data set sucks, then actually it sucks. That means you need to fix it.
Yeah.
Or if you have data sets that is just consistently getting bad votes, you basically just take it down. Yeah.
Oh
To avoid that people are actually using the wrong product.
man, it
So
sounds an awful lot like self-service.
exactly, but that's at the end what you want. I mean, you don't want to replicate data. You don't want to introduce additional data management controls and activities on data that has been replicated, right? I mean, you just want to leverage what is from source,
Yeah.
yeah, and basically leverage what's in place there and just make the data product available.
You can see in an old world, I would say, hey, I brought in 10 contractors to go fix data quality. And the business team has said, they've been working on it for 2 years and I haven't seen the difference. Hey, I brought in two contractors to focus on the quality of these data products. Hey, I've immediately seen the difference, right? So focusing less effort on the right spaces creates a lot more value. So talking to value, let's talk about the next space because I think this is even more exciting than data management. As a CDO, data management foundation, and then on top of that, if you're effective, you're able to actually accelerate data value. I'm not sure where I got this quote from, but I loved it. It's, we get blamed for data management, we get paid for data value. So if you're not delivering value, you're not going to get paid. So on the value side, I think it's even more exciting. But here's in some ways it's also a little bit challenging, right? you're not going to get value out of the box. You implement the mesh, you're off to the races, you're celebrating with the champagne. Like, oh, hold on a second, right? Got a mesh. I've got the data management pieces worked out. Fantastic. What are the secrets to making that turn into real value for the company? I would say number one, you have to have data product owners that understand the business. If your data product owners are pulling data sets together and curating them in a way that they know the business teams are going to use because they understand their business, there's an intimate knowledge there, so to speak, about what the business teams need. That's pretty powerful. And on the front end, equally important, if now not more important, if on the front end you have a business consumer or a data consumer that knows how to use the products and that knows how to use the tools, right? They're Tableau experts, right? Or at least they're Tableau users. They're Power BI users. They're Power Automate users. They know how to use the BI tools and maybe a couple of the automation tools very effectively, and they know how to bring products forward. If I have a data consumer that knows how to use the mesh and a product owner that knows how to deliver value through products, man, I've got something. Now, it's easy to say, hard to do. And Marco, I know that you've been a part of some pretty big literacy programs in your organization. I That's the key there is somehow driving that data literacy on both ends, so to speak, right? So what are your thoughts there? How important is literacy, and any tips or ideas for how somebody might approach that?
Yeah, so it is a very it's a very hot topic, I think, for any organization at this moment. Typical, the tendency has always been, hey, I want data and I want access to good data, and it's somebody else's problem to actually make it available to me. But that needs to change, right? So the mindset that needs to happen is that you need to think about what is my role in the organization, and the data that I am producing as part of my daily activities or the process I'm responsible for, how can it actually drive performance in the wider organization?
Yeah.
Yeah. From there, if you get that level of awareness, you can start extending then in terms of, okay, well, that means that certain data sets need to be made available, for example, through a data mesh. Or, hey, there are data quality requirements that are beyond the data, that beyond my own control, but there's data quality requirements coming from others that I need to actually build into my data management. So getting people to think about data can drive performance. Data is the engine behind digitalization. Making sure that people understand what is their role in this whole data management space, whether you're the manager or process operator, doesn't really matter. I mean, everybody needs to understand what their role is, and how to turn what it needs to take to make the data fit for purpose and to be used by other parts in the organization.
You hit on something there that's really important that and actually hadn't thought about. I think what I'm thinking is data value is not one person's job, right?
No,
There's this in this data supply chain. There are a series of people who need to understand their role, and especially if you're going to implement a data mesh, some of those roles are going to change, hopefully for the better, but they're still going to change, right? And so the people that are dealing with data at the source, those personas, they have a role. You would say somebody would argue the most important role for data quality. But you said on something that really caught me thinking, because even if they do their job perfectly, right, their data that that they think is important, that they've been told is important, is now top notch, is delivered forward to a domain, and that product owner then is looking at the domain and bringing data forward. You got me think about it. It's not just about the quality of the raw data; it's about the quality of the product itself. It's how you put data together. Data aggregation can be poor if you don't put the right data sets together. Data aggregation can be poor if you put data together in a way that nobody can really use. Somebody picks up the product and says, yeah, you got the right information, but it's not really put together the way that I can use it. So data mesh almost elevates that quality standard from good raw data to quality data products. It's a completely different the way of thinking. I think that I think is really, really important.
it introduces an additional level of an additional quality dimension to the data. It's like you said, you can bring, let's say, high quality data sets together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you pull them together, you may find yourself that the data actually doesn't integrate well,
Yeah.
or that the common denominators in these data sets, like location, or I don't know, a cost center, whatever, right? I mean, if the data doesn't align, you still have a crap product.
Yeah.
So it's really important from that product mindset, yeah, that if you bring the data together, what are the requirements for the data to actually, yeah, to integrate, yeah, to gel.
Yeah. To make an example, and it's something from my past, it'd say, hey, here's a, and we used to call them fact tables years ago before we had something as powerful as a mesh, but here's a great fact table with aggregated data, and it's the location information you wanted. Hey, well, and the data consumer, the good news is location data is perfect. The bad news is it's the wrong location data, right? You gave me cities and states. I wanted offices, right?
Yeah,
And so the nuances, right? And that's why I think, again, going back to the notion of picking the right data product owner is so important, because sometimes you have to go beyond the data field, and sometimes the metadata doesn't give you enough information. And so you have to be able to almost kind of be at least early on, I think for most companies' mesh journeys, you have to know enough about what's needed, know enough about what's available, and then find a way to kind of piece it together. I Let me ask you, because I think this is going to be hard for a lot of organizations. Going back to finding the right data product owner, who would you put there? So I've you watched and you learned from companies that have already implemented the mesh, and in some cases, those data product owners are tied to some of the traditional application or data source owners, right? So you have a data source owner, they're in finance, they own that SAP data. And in finance, they've broken up the data ownership by some levels. One of those owners becomes a data product owner. Fantastic. Now you've got somebody in finance who's then trying to provide finance data to somebody in retail. Here's a data product for you, retail team. Isn't it wonderful? Retail team is like, yes, not really what I was looking for. I was looking for these other sets, right? And so that's one way to do it. Let me give you a contrast and I'll get your thoughts. Right? Another way to do it is you pick somebody from the business and say, look, hey, business and retail person, come over here. You're going to be the product owner. Fantastic. You know the retail business better than anybody, right? And you're going to be this product owner, and you're going to pull finance data. And maybe you're going to pull some other data sets together into these products. Beautiful. But that product owner maybe doesn't know enough about the back end domain data, if you will, to bring it forward. So it's a struggle and it's a balance. Like, where do you find the right person, and how do you find the right person, and where do you start? So a lot to challenge it, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you would approach it.
yeah, so this is a really interesting dilemma. um, my alternative would be this business person, but maybe a digital lead. So digital is very hot in many organizations. So there's already always somebody out there that's championing, for example, digitalization of your supply chain.
Right.
Yeah? And I think that such a role could be a really good role, because that person, because it's all about digitalization of the organization, of your business, and data and digital just go hand in hand. I mean, you cannot have one without the other. So that means you have somebody with passion, and
Yeah.
somebody who wants to drive outcomes, so value focus,
Mm,
yeah, and somebody who can appreciate the importance of data,
yeah. Those are
and
three
then the
great.
rest will naturally follow.
Uh, Let me repeat that, because I think those are someone that's passionate, right? You want them to be passionate about the digital journey. Someone that appreciates the data, if you will. Somebody understands that. Hey, hold on a second. When you say appreciate, you mean knows the data. And I think the last one was the business focus.
Man.
Well, I think those are it. I think those are it. Passion, data knowledge, and some level of business intimacy or business knowledge. So to speak. I think if you get those together somehow, then you're well on your way. All right, let's close up on this last part. This is the imagination session, right? This is a hey, let's sit back and let Adrian imagine what you could do with this, and then Marco, you're going to play the role of the CDO that said, not so fast, right? So challenge, right? All right, let's pick an industry. Let's pick pharmaceuticals or healthcare, right? I'm fascinated by some of the digital transformation initiatives that are being driven in healthcare and pharmaceuticals. We're trying to, on the back end, integrate research labs, right? So that we can create a better response to some of the pandemic emergencies that are going on around the world. We're trying to integrate hospital networks so that we can share information about patient care. We're trying to tie doctors and patients, right? Patients that are wearing, sensors or any device, and doctors are trying to tie that patient information with hospital information or other patient information with clinical information. There's a lot that we're tying together in this healthcare environment. And there's a lot of different consumers. Doctor might be a consumer, a patient might be, again, a consumer of data, might be a consumer. Research, specialists are certainly consumers. And so I would say I would love to take a mesh and apply it to that problem. Bring all those sources together quickly, create products that are useful to each consumer. The products that a doctor wants are going to be different than the products a patient wants, or different than the products a clinical analyst wants. But I think in a mesh, it makes all that a lot easier. All right, challenge me, C. What's wrong with that, Mr. CDO? Well, how would you? What are some of the things I
Well,
need to think about before I run and implement that?
well, first of all, great idea. But let's start basically with the regulatory aspects here first, right? So
Yeah.
data
Don't
privacy is
say it.
really
Don't say it.
important.
Data privacy. I know. I knew you were going to go
Yeah.
there. Data privacy.
So whatever you do, we have to make sure that data privacy is safeguarded and that we meet all regulatory requirements. Yeah.
Yeah.
Assuming we can do that, and I know with some of the capabilities you have, that can be addressed, then I think it's a fantastic opportunity because you can, like you said, you can bring various data sources together and make it available as a
Yeah. Well,
usable data product. I mean, fantastic.
it's something when we talk about data products, it's right to talk about reusability. It's right to talk about making them interoperable so they solve a lot of different solutions. Maybe we don't talk enough about the governance and controls, right? So when you build a product, you want to be able to say, well, only these people should be able to see this product. And so I think there's some controls built in certain products to make sure that they don't end up, if it's got privacy information or confidential information, that it doesn't go the wrong way. You can still control a product. Let me give you one more. I don't know, should we do finance or energy? Let's pick something safe
Your
like
pick.
I don't know. I want to do energy, but I was like, well, let's do energy. So finance is crazy too. I'll just do finance real quick. Finance, I love what we're trying to do there with pushing analytics to the edge for customers. On the finance side, what we're able to do, I think, on the back end with managing and trying to run a fraud organization or kind of a risk organization, it's hard to do because you're trying to pull so much information. And now, if you work in those areas, there's more data available, right? You have patterns and profiles for customers that you never had, right? There's ways to detect and predict fraud in ways that you never could do before, so to speak, but all that requires data, and a mesh makes that very exciting. And so, but let's do energy for a second, right? I'm imagining in the energy business, if I think about some of the big things, what would a digital twin look like on a mesh? Right? You're bringing all these sensors, you're bringing all this information about any specific environment, whatever it is, whatever you're trying to digitalize, so to speak. Digital twin in a mesh, I think, is exciting. How would I do asset management on the back end? Right? I'm trying to manage for an energy company that we're assets they're all over the place, right? They're the legacy oil assets, they're the new energy assets that we're building, and then there's other assets, so to speak, that are still coming along in our new business models. And so managing all those assets on a mesh seems easier if I can use the existing data sources and then bring them together. What about trying to share asset information or trying to share information with other energy companies, right? I know today there are kind of communities and networks that exist where information is shared because on the back end, it takes a lot of different companies working together to build a solution. How would that look like on a mesh? If you have three companies operating meshes and they're able to share products that they design and that they want to share, so to speak, in a secure way, man, that's and and I'm not giving you a chance to challenge you, Marco, but I'm excited. What do you think? Right? Maybe in a closing comment. Well, how am I too excited? Are the possibilities there?
No, no. I think the sky is the limit here, right? The advantage of a mesh is you can chuck up your source data sets into
Yeah,
usable, consumable pieces of data that you can make available to other consumers, whether inside or outside the organization.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really the key. And the the mesh platform that you have provides a nice bridge for sharing and collaboration and exchanging data sets between organizations or between departments. And it doesn't necessarily have to be your whole digital twin, right? I mean, because there might be certain parts that you want to share, and that
yeah,
you can relatively easily do that with the mesh.
yeah,
Still some work to be done in plumbing in the backend, of course, to make sure that the data does really integrate well, where what we initially started with. But still, once you have that done, then yeah, the sharing of the data products is then straightforward.
Yeah, you said collaboration. We went the whole, 30 minutes or so without even saying the word democratization. But man, that's what it's about. It's about internal democratization. It's about external democratization. We're able to share data and collaborate. I think that's we talk about as a CDO. We're always talking about unlocking value. Man, that's a big key for unlocking value.
Oh,
Marco,
absolutely. And this is where your champion comes in. So this is why you have to pick the right champions on the business side to make sure that you come up with the right data products that actually drive value for the organization, because you don't want to end up with thousands and thousands of data products of which, I don't know, 50 or 60% is not being used. So
yeah.
you need that ownership.
Man, that's another show. But when we start to operationalize the data mesh and we start to really feel the need to scale, feel the need, everything we talked about today about management is going to be very, very important. If we do it right from the beginning, then we'll be able to scale better. But absolutely, maybe we'll bring you up for another show. But I would love to talk about what happens when you end up with 1,000 data products and what are the keys to making sure that you manage those products effectively. Marco, my friend, I can't thank you enough for the show. Send me a soup waffle if you have a chance. Looking forward to talking to you further. But really appreciate your presence. I know that the audience is going to really appreciate your comments and your points today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. That was exciting. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It's always great to talk to a current CDO about the challenges they're facing and about their perspectives. I know there's other CDOs out there that wish they could chime into the conversation and say, oh, hold on, Marco, hold on, Adrian, I have a different view. And certainly eager to hear those conversations as well. Reach out to us via LinkedIn or via your social media platform of choice so we can talk some more. Let me summarize where the conversation ended today. First and foremost, once again, thank you, Marco, for joining us. We talked about data governance. If you're a CDO, that's where you start, right? You have to have a strong data foundation to be successful. You won't scale, you won't sustain if you don't have a strong data foundation. We talked about some of the elements in a data mesh that I think will put up CDO in a position to say, hold on a second, maybe I've been doing this wrong, or maybe there's a way to do it better. There's a consistency that the mesh provides. There's a focus with products that a mesh provides that I think is going to allow us to put our efforts and our time in the areas that matter, in the areas that are going to be more visible to the business. Make governance matter to the consumers that are using the data. We also talked about data value. If you've got that governance piece built, I said, my favorite quote is, CDOs get blamed for governance, we get paid for value. You've got to deliver value. And what we talked about wasn't just about racing to get the value. We said, hey, hold on a second. If you're going to deliver value, you want to have the right data product owner, and you want to have a well-educated, well-trained, maybe a better way to phrase it, a well-trained data consumer, a business consumer that can use the tools and use the products. And if you've got those two things, you're on your way to delivering value because they will drive value for you. And then we closed today by just imagining some of the possibilities. And that was fun as well to kind of go back and forth. But I hope that today's conversation also will allow you to imagine some of the possibilities. And we look forward to episode 3. Hope you'll join us then. Thank you for your time.